Good morning. I'm Marilee Rosine Beasley coming to you live from my backyard, and it started raining a few minutes ago. I live on a little tiny lake, the Lake of Jersey Village. Today happens to be Pentecost, and I also saw another term on my calendar. I have a couple of calendars. At least one of them is in English, French, and Spanish, and I wasn't familiar with the term Whitsun, and I looked it up, and apparently it's short for Whit Sunday, and it is a holiday that is celebrated by many Christians around the world. It isn't something that I was aware of. I'm not sure why my church doesn't mention it. Anyway, okay, so today is Pentecost, and so I just want to also remind everybody tomorrow is Memorial Day. So behind me, I have some things that are related to Memorial Day, to flags and things like that. I want to also mention that 2 summers ago, when I got together with my family in Florida, my mother was born and she's buried very near Waldo, Florida, which is 14 miles from Gainesville. I asked them to write military stories because a distant relative of my husband's mentioned that right now we're getting older, and once we die, the things we know about our parents, our family, our uncles, maybe cousins, brothers, whoever they are, all of these stories will be gone. So they did write many military stories. I do have two of my brothers were able to tell me more about my dad and his brother Carl. So my dad was in the military in World War II. My dad is no longer, he's deceased. He's buried in Baton Rouge. He was transferred many years ago to Louisiana, so he's actually buried in Baton Rouge. My brother donated his uniform to I believe, to the World War II museum that's in New Orleans. And honestly, I didn't even realize that uniform still existed. It was in the attic at my parents' house in Baton Rouge. So anyway, I found out recently from a friend that there is some kind of thing with the Library of Congress called the Memory Project. So these stories can be archived there. So I recommend that you, with your family, if you have members of your family who were in the military, that you get people to write down the stories as quickly as they're willing to do it, because people my generation, some of my cousins are older than I am. My mother was the youngest of 6 children of the first family that my grandfather had, and so we are the youngest group of that group. Some of my cousins are no longer with us. Unfortunately, some of them have died of cancer, anyway, and that's a whole nother story. Okay, so anyway, please, I encourage you to write stories down of your childhood. Maybe you know things about your parents. My husband did that about his mother recently, or I read it recently. And my great aunt, Dr. Hilda F. Rosine Lund, was one of the first female professors at UT Austin, which I think is pretty remarkable that she had her PhD a long time ago, when it was rare for even men to always have their PhD in science. So anyway, we have an interesting legacy in my family. All right, so I want to just encourage everybody to think about that. So this weekend is Memorial Day. I have been staying home a little too much, and I had forgotten that it was going to be Memorial Day on Monday until I went outside a couple of days ago and there were flags up and down the street. So anyway, I will put a flag out as soon as I can. I also want to mention that I ran for city council in my neighborhood, and because I didn't like some things that I saw, I did an investigation of our local city council election a couple of years ago, or 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and I discovered that there were a lot of mail-in ballots. I did a survey, and I discovered that a very qualified candidate lost by 3 votes. When I did the survey, Not everybody wrote back, but 3 people did. Many people wrote back, not everyone, but they wrote back, indicated they had never applied for mail-in ballots. And so when I checked the election roster, somebody voted in their name, and one of those voters is a friend of mine. And so I wrote to the State of Texas Election Division. A friend of mine was in the count room the day of the election, saw many irregularities, including the candidate who won by 3 votes was in the polling place the day of the election, which is illegal. It is a Class C misdemeanor. Somebody else shouted out the count is close, which is a Class A misdemeanor. Unfortunately, the state of Texas doesn't have a lot of manpower to come and investigate small cities like us. And of course, since these were misdemeanors, they don't have the clout as if they were felonies. Anyway, I did report all of that to the election division. My friend who was in the count room documented everything. She reported all of this. So many people are aware that there were some problems with our Jersey Village City Council election, and that is why I decided to run, and that's why I became a watchdog. So I ran, and of course, I was defeated. They were going to make sure, because I asked too many questions, and then I decided to run for state representative as a Republican candidate for state representative. So anyway, this is one of my cards from that election when I ran for state representative. And I did do a card. This is from my city council election about American values. I had things like the Constitution, liberty and freedom, right to bear arms, quality education, also personal responsibility, limited government, rugged individualism, and so forth. So these are things that are important to me. Now, I had ended up redesigning my card when I ran. This was my first card. And some of the things that are on here is I wanted education reform, healthcare reform, I wanted immigration reform, prisons reform, I wanted to eliminate human trafficking and illicit drugs, and also I'm always concerned about the conservation of resources. My mother and dad were chemists. My mother and dad always had a big backyard garden, and they always took their produce and made sure it went back into the ground, which I do also. I ask the person who mows my lawn to always take those grass clippings, put them on my garden, and now I believe I am raising worms, because everything that can be returned to the soil, I do that. So anyway, one of the things that I like to mention to people is if they take a bowl like this, put it in their sink while they're washing their hands, maybe brushing their teeth, you can take this kind of thing, put it all together. You could pour it, like I have rocks, so you can pour it on the rocks or do something else with it. If the water is pretty clean, I even use it to water some plants. So this is a way that I conserve water. I go ahead and replenish the soil with clippings, weeds, dried leaves, whatever I can find. All right, so anyway, to continue on, I want to share some other things with you. I do have some things here. I have a lot of flags. Here's some pillows, Home of the Brave. This one says, support our troops. These are some pillows. I gave these away to some friends when they helped me run for political office. All right, this is a book that I found many years ago. I've read it more than once, and it talks about your best year, and it has some questions, and it helps you define some of goals for yourself. And I don't even know if this is still in print, and I just really have liked this book a lot. I've occasionally picked it up, sort of skimmed through it to remind myself some of the things about setting goals. You want to measure your goal to see if you did it. Now, I don't believe that anybody should chastise themselves if they don't reach their goals, because sometimes life gets in the way and so forth. All right, well, I have a lot of books out here today, and the reason is I collect books, and I like to read books. I like to read new ideas. Some are books I've heard about. Some books I've paid very little for, because a lot of times people donate books. This book, AP World History Exam 2018 edition, I paid $1. The reason I only paid $1 is I was last year in Richmond, Virginia, or near Richmond, Virginia, And the church, we were having our annual Beasley reunion, had a whole lot of books that had been donated, and they were asking for, I think it was 50 cents for paperback and $1 for hardback. So I just went ahead and picked up many books. Some were very amazing books, and I did pick up so many that it was more than I could fit in my suitcase, and I decided it was worth shipping back one box of books. So I put what I could in my suitcase, and the rest I shipped home. And this was one of the books. So there were others that were very remarkable. One was on a big, thick book that was about mythology. And so I just said, oh my gosh, I couldn't believe that they were doing this. But at some point, sometimes something like this might be a burden for somebody, and they're glad to donate it to a church for a book sale or to the Friends of the Library. All right, so anyway, moving on, I just want to share with you some of the things that I've collected along the way. I got real interested in survival a few years ago. This one is the worst case scenario survival handbook for traveling. This one just says the worst case scenario survival handbook. This one is the essentials survival manual, and I believe I got this at Barnes and Noble. I don't remember where I got these, but I've seen these in many places. Okay, so I want to share with you some of the other things that I've bought along the way. Barnes and Noble has had a series of these books that are called 30-second, and they have different topics. I think 30-second math or just 30-second maybe just economics, I think was one of the titles. So I bought a few of these, and I thought, well, I can just kind of skim through them and see what I already know and add a little bit of knowledge, for myself, because I'm always interested in learning new things. Okay, so moving on, I've got some other things that I want to share. I've done my best to sort of put these in categories. I saw this book at Barnes and Noble one day, and I haven't read it. I was intrigued by the title, If the Allies Had Fallen, 60 Alternative Scenarios of World War II. And I thought, wow, what if the Allies had fallen? Where would we be now? What would our country look like? What would the world look like? And it's kind of scary to think about where we might have been. Now, right now, I'm a little concerned about where we are right now, because I'm not happy with some people. I think there's some strange things going on with our leadership, especially with the coronavirus. Many of you know that I'm a public health nurse, have been since 1991, and I don't understand why we're not going out in the air, in the sunlight, because I've emailed President Trump several times and said, please get everybody outdoors. Let's just pretend we're pioneers for 2 to 3 months. Let's go camping. And I think we would have had a lot less problems with illness and death if he had listened to me, but I doubt he even knows I emailed him, and I did send one email through Twitter. Okay, so some other books that I've gotten over the years. This one says See Jane Win, and it's a report, and it's on how 1,000 girls became successful women, and I was very intrigued with this book, and so I think it's important that we make sure that all children win, whether you're male or female. So anyway, women, I think, have had a lot of problems. I know from reading some things about my great aunt, Dr. Hilda F. Rosine Lund, that I think she finally gave up and left to the University of Texas because she couldn't get the raises she should have gotten. And, she was a woman, and I think that she was a threat to the men around her, and she was hardworking. So anyway, I think that she and her husband, Dr. Elmer Lund, gave up and left. All right, so here's another book that I have that's called Think Better, and I think that all of us can think better sometimes, and I find that I'm always looking for new ideas. This is another book I saw, Secrets of Mental Math, and it says here the math, this is a guide to lightning calculations and amazing math tricks, so I thought that was intriguing. Okay, now another book that I bought many, many years ago, and this is I didn't know where my other one got to, so I bought this, I don't know, about 3 or 4 years ago. This is called Feeling Good. It's by Dr. David Burns, and he talks, he's looking at the good, about changing the way we perceive ourselves, and then we can change the way we feel, is basically what this book is about. And I do believe that if we are careful with what we put in our minds, we are careful with what we say to ourselves, that I do believe we can go from feeling depressed to feeling good. So I want to emphasize, this is I think a great book. It's been around for a long time. Something else, a book I picked up, haven't read it, but I was intrigued by the title. It says Choosing Donald Trump. It says God, Anger, Hope, and Why Christian Conservatives Supported Him, which I was kind of concerned when he was running for president. I was like, oh my gosh. And anyway, I want you to know that eventually I changed my mind. I voted for him. There's times when I don't understand why he's doing what he's doing, and I do not think he's a fool. I think what he does sometimes is he says things, and then he gets to see who his real friends are, and I just think he has great instincts. I think that he's a man for our times, and I think it's great that he doesn't owe people favors. He doesn't owe politicians favors. He is very well-to-do, which is a fortunate thing. So he doesn't owe developers. He is a developer. He doesn't owe a lot of favors to developers. And so I'm concerned. He did endorse a candidate for my congressional district during the primary, which didn't make sense to me. I don't think that that's a good idea for Senator Cruz and Trump to do that. Anyway, that's my personal opinion. I think that the leadership should stay out of the primaries. Okay, so anyway, moving on. This is a book, and there is a video that I really liked. I was very active for a while in what's called Living Water International, and they did a video. It was called Advent Conspiracy. Can Christmas Still Change the World? And this was written, this is the book that goes along with that, and this is a church that is well known in Houston, that is affiliated with this. Anyway, moving on, just some other things. I came across this last night going through some books. This is George Orwell's book, 1984. Many young people wouldn't even know about this book. Anyway, it makes me wonder sometimes if we're in this situation. Here's a book, Anne Rice. Many people know her. She wrote a lot of vampire books about vampires. She's from New Orleans, and I've been to New Orleans many times. My daughter lived there for a while. Some other friends lived there. Of course, my dad was transferred to Louisiana many years ago, and she was raised Catholic, and she, as I understand it, has returned to the roots of her faith. So anyway, this is a book that I saw at Half Price Books. I was intrigued, and it says it's a spiritual confession called Out of Darkness, and I found this book fascinating, and I loaned it to a friend, and she sent it back to me. Here's a book. I got it at Dollar Tree. It says My First Book of Prayers. They have a lot of books like this at Dollar Tree for $1. Here's another one. They have these books right here. This is something I bought. I didn't buy it at Dollar Tree. I got it at, I believe, at Cracker Barrel, and I understand, I don't know too much about their story. As I recall, the wife ended up dying of cancer, and so it's about that. And so anyway, that is would be pretty hard, a hard situation. Here's one, Charles Spurgeon, a very famous person. Charles Spurgeon, Prayers and Spiritual Warfare, which I believe there's something going on, and I just say I think it's spiritual warfare. C.S. Lewis is a very famous author. This is a copy of the Screw Tape Letters. Didn't even realize I had this until yesterday, and anyway, apparently I do. Here's another book, Faith Alone, The Doctrine of Justification. So this is something I have not read, and I This is another book. I like to get books and have them ready for me to read. This one is by Philip Yancey. What's So Amazing About Grace? So these are just some books that, I bought. I have discovered in the last year or two that I have Jewish ancestry. So I decided to start looking into things related to being Jewish. I've been looking at the holidays, and this was a book that I bought, I'm not sure where, Hebrew for Dummies. It's been fascinating. I haven't picked it up for a while, but I read it for a little while last night, and it's just really fascinating about the history of the language, because Hebrew is a very old language, and so this author writes in a very interesting style. So Hebrew for Dummies, I'll be working on that for a while. I do like to buy things that are related to cooking. I didn't even realize that I loved reading about recipes. Now, I'm not going to say I'm a gourmet cook. I do like to try a few things out. And this, I believe I bought this at Dollar Tree. Don't remember where I bought this. Rick and Bubba's Big Honkin' Book of Grub. I was in South Carolina with my daughter. We went on a trip, and I believe it was Savannah. We flew to Savannah, and this is a book I brought back, a cookbook from that. And I've had this for a while, so this is another book. And I'm going to start experimenting more with decorating with icing. I don't eat much sugar, but this would be an exception. There's a lot of people, and my daughter was diagnosed with breast cancer. I saw this book at Dollar Tree, or somebody else spotted it. I bought this book, started reading it. It's written by this doctor researcher, and I believe she's up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And she has these issues. Since I believe we have Jewish, German Jewish, Ashkenazi ancestry, then that would mean our family could be at risk. And so I actually started looking at all the cousins I have in my first cousins, and a lot of them have had cancer and some have died, and they weren't old. So I am concerned about what that might mean for my family. And I will do more work later with that. And this is a book I bought, Campbell's 1, 2, 3 Dinners. This could be something that it just shows you some ideas that you can do with Campbell's soup, and then you add other ingredients, and they're quick and easy. I do my best to mostly use very fresh food. Occasionally I do like on occasion to use like Campbell's mushroom soup, like that for things. This is a magazine that I stumbled on at Barnes & Noble. It's called the National Maritime Historical Society Sea History. This is number 170. And so I bought it and brought it home, and I was fascinated with this whole magazine. It's got the history of things. They've got a lot of very interesting historical things. They also have a thing that's directed more at children, an article. And here it is, New Zealand sea lions. And that looked like that would be great for talking to kids about animals and sea history. This was an amazing magazine. So I'm glad that I found this magazine, because this is important. There's a lot of history related to the seas in the world. I'm of Scandinavian descent. That means my ancestors were Vikings, and the Vikings liked to go by ship and boat, and so I guess you'd say I too have that history. Okay, now here's a book. This says The Great War of Our Time, the CIA's Fight Against Terrorism from Al-Qaeda to ISIS. So anyway, this is written by former CIA Deputy Director Michael Morrell. Okay, so this was a book that I confess I haven't read, but in one of these days I'm going to go on a camping trip where it's quiet and sit and read some books. David Limbaugh wrote this book, Crimes Against Liberty, an indictment of President Barack Obama, I confess I haven't read it, and that is on my to-do list to read. Because I think there's some things that he's been involved with that I don't think are nice. That's my opinion, and it's still a free country to voice my opinion. And I'm concerned about what's been going on with people that have been in leadership. This is a very famous person from World War II, Bonhoeffer. He was a pastor, a martyr, a prophet, and a spy. Okay, so anyway, he was in Germany, as I understand it, and very famous person. I have another book. I believe I probably bought this book. I'm not sure where I bought it or how I acquired it. It's Joshua Kendall, author of America's Obsessives, First Dads, Parenting and Politics from George Washington to Barack Obama. So he's got, stories here. So that's another on I'm going to read it, a list. Sometimes if these are not textbooks, what I might do is sort of skim through them, kind of get the gist of the stories, because I have so many of these. I want to just point out some other things here. Now, I like to, and I've shown this before, but just to make sure, this was a item that was on the ground at my friend's house. So I brushed it with some gold, sprinkled it with some glitter, and I will can glue this bow or something else on. And this is something that helps your children look at what's on the ground. So anyway, that is something that I think can be quite beautiful, and this is just something I was experimenting with. All right, so to continue on, I have some other items here that could be fun art projects, simple art projects with your children. These are things that I didn't realize it for a while, but I have this tree in my backyard. It has they're balls, and these were run over. These I got at the bank nearby, and they were run over by cars, so they're flatter. So what I was thinking is I will cut these off, draw some kind of a little black line to indicate the stems, and I'll maybe something along here. And this could be a simple art project that a child could do. Very simple, sort of has them looking at, at the ground and seeing what they can find, and then you can turn it into a very inexpensive project. Right here, I had some stickers, so I have just taken these quickly and put them on here to kind of see what they would look like. Another thing that I've been doing lately is I've been gathering things that are sort of like maybe junk mail or just things I have left over. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these things and put them by color, and then I can make some kind of a mosaic out of it, perhaps. Some of you know that I do glass art, and so I'm always looking for very inexpensive ways to do those items. I do really like this shard shop in Destin, and I've used, and here are some little tiny shells. I just wanted to show you. This has kind of got a dual purpose. These shells I bought a bag at Hobby Lobby. And this can be something that you can look with your children at the different kind of shells, or it could maybe be part of an art project. I did that once, where I took a little canvas, and somebody used this, kind of mimicked my glass art, and used some shells on the canvas. So I thought that was really interesting. The child was about 10, so she just had an interesting way of using those shells. So the shells could be science, and it can be art. Here's a book, Lessons in Balance, and this is by Scout, and it's a dog, and I love dogs. I have a dog now, and I've really missed having a dog. Okay, so moving on. I don't even know where this book came from, but it says Texas Politics, covering Lone Star State. It looks to me like it's a textbook. I'm not sure when I acquired it, and this could be very interesting. I do think it's important to remember that I'm not from Texas. I've lived here twice. I'm not one of those people, no offense to everybody, that just wanted to rush back here as soon as they could and live here. I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and at the time it was the oil capital of the world. And people were moving back and forth between Tulsa and Houston finally got bigger and they won. So now Houston's the oil capital of the world, and that's kind of why I live here. Because my husband is an engineer, he was teaching at a university, and we decided time to go back to Texas, only I thought it was going to be Austin, and it turned out to be Houston, and I love where I live. Also, I want to show you what's inside of my mug. Facts are pesky things. These are candy wrappers, and I haven't done anything with them, but I started thinking, since I like to think about what else can you do with something, that you could take these, smooth them out, and perhaps these, if you had different colors, like at Christmas you see green, and at Easter you see pink. Maybe this could be some kind of little art project. I haven't done it, it's just an idea. But see, what I'm showing is that these things are not expensive, and you might have, something, and you could, if you had saved a lot of these, you could have a picture of some sort. So anyway, these are just some ideas that are very inexpensive. This is something that a friend had, and I like the sentiment. It says, some days the best thing is to take care of yourself. And I think it's easy as parents or as moms, grandmothers, nurses, teachers, is to start to forget to stop, breathe, and take care of ourselves. So anyway, I just wanted to show this. And this was done, the person is Sandra Magsamen, a collection of Department 56. And they have really amazing things with Department 56. So anyway, this is just to let you know about that sentiment and this artist, because I always like to promote artists. Here's some other books that I've collected along the way. This one apparently was made into a movie, and it says here, The Far Side of the World, and that is right there. Here's Conspiracy of Paper, a Conspiracy of Paper. This is a novel, but it was a New York Times notable books. So I just thought that was intriguing. Okay, so moving right along, just to let you know, I do really like the Mother Earth News publications, and this is one of those, and they have a lot of great ideas. Here's a dictionary that I probably saw somebody donated. It says primary, and it's science and math for years 1, 2, and 3. And so there's a lot of ideas in here that I could do with young kids. This is from the Natural Museum of Science here in Houston, and I had this, and it says the Paleo Prep, and it's at the museum. Here's an educator's guide that I got sometime between 2018 and 2019, and I found that the other day, and I thought that would be good. These are things that I don't think they wear out. This planetarium I've been to before. It's not open every night, but they do have scheduled times when people bring their amazing telescopes, send them up, and it's just great. This is a book. When I was taking reading methods about 45 years ago, 44, whatever, when I was at UT Austin, and I also taught the class. This was a book. Margaret Hillert wrote some books, and this is a Follett Just Beginning to Read book. This one's The Funny Baby, and it's the story of the ugly duckling. And this book belongs to my daughter, who is now 49 years old. And in the back, there's even, shows you some word lists and things that have to do with the sight words that are in here, or the words. And the other day when I was doing these videos, I did forget to mention about the Stolch sight words, which you can go to the internet, look them up these days, and get different grade levels. These are items that I find from time to time. I find them at Dollar Tree, like this, and I pick them up because they're great when you're doing, this one could be for writing. It says writing prompts. It could be for other things. This one looks like it's about It's clouds and weather, so that you can see it tells you what's in there. Here's another book that I picked up one day at Dollar Tree. They have these series. This is space, and this one is Planet Earth. This is another child's book, and here's Is There a Doctor in the Zoo, which I think it would be good for kids. Here's Amazing Questions and Answers, and I'm not sure when I acquired that. I'm just always looking for things. Here is another thing I believe I got at Dollar Tree. This is First Words Homework Helper, and so that's something that I'm pretty sure I got at Dollar Tree. I also got this, the Texas Gardener, and so I'm intrigued. I'm starting to garden. I'm looking at what's already in the house that I moved to. My mother just loved flowers. She grew lots of flowers, and one of her favorite flowers was zinnias, and the zinnias are a flower that fortunately bees like, so I will plant some of those or buy some as soon as I can. Also, this right here, this happens to be a magazine from United Airlines, and this one was just, Tel Aviv, and I went ahead and kept it, and it has other places. I go to Virginia a lot. 3 of my siblings live in Virginia, and my husband's family's originally from Virginia, so I go to Virginia a lot. This book, I save every book, and I believe that we had friends who went to Madagascar for 2 years in the Peace Corps, and I think that's why I have that book. For a while, I read a lot of mystery novels, and this was one of those. Here's a book I found, Wish You Were Here, France. I like maps. So here is Rand McNally, Concise Atlas of Europe. And so this is a map, and I've been to Europe several times. I took my kids camping twice. I've gone to Asia many, many times. Here is a little book of nurses, The Rules. And I just want to read some of this. I think this is an amazing book. It was written by a doctor and a nurse. They knew each other very well, and they collaborated on this book. And I really like a lot of the things. Some of them are really funny. Some are just, like reminder. Number 10 says, the only way to determine a patient's needs is to listen, look carefully, and ask good questions. Then it says, watch patients carefully who are being treated with a second drug to correct a reaction to a first drug. No suppository belongs in the nose. And when patients are admitted to the hospital, they bring their dignity with them. Make sure no one robs them of it. False teeth get lost. Touch patients each time you see them, even if you only hold their hands or feel the pulse. Do this especially with older people. So anyway, this is just just a book that is a great reminder of some of the issues when you're a nurse. Okay, so anyway, I just want to remind everybody, that this is Memorial Day weekend, and around here we have what's called Camp Hope, and Camp Hope is a place that it has veterans who are suffering from PTSD. It's a faith-based program. It's near here. I've done a few things to help with Camp Hope. So if you would make sure, you can look them up on the internet, Camp Hope. They have a lot of groups around this Houston area. They apparently are replicating Camp Hope in some other places. You in your area, may have something similar to Camp Hope. Other things I want to just mention that, is to maybe if you're looking for ideas for your children to help with, you could have your kids think about what's it like to be was to be an American Indian. We have a lot of different tribes around the country. They didn't all live in teepees, and I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is Indian territory, and we had the 5 civilized tribes in Oklahoma. And so I encourage you to look up and find out which are the 5 civilized tribes and what does it mean by the Trail of Tears, because it's a very sad situation in our country. Now, and that's something else I want to mention is I take a lot of photographs with my cell phone. So if you have a child that is looking for something to be interested in, you might consider letting them use your cell phone if they don't, let them do that. Now, something else I wanted to point out, I went around my yard today and I picked up and cut some leaves and things like that. And I just want to show the variety of leaves for my yard. I have purple leaves. I have this from one of my plants. This is growing. This one is another different shape. I have this shape. I have this. I have, this is another plant that the thing broke off. Here are some things that are, some people would consider weeds. I have some bushes that have this kind of leaf, and I have this kind of leaf that is in my yard. I just was amazed. I've been amazed at how different these are. And then here is, I have pine needles that I didn't find one that was green, but I've just been floored at the difference in the shape and the size and so forth. So this might be something to do with your children while you're at home, is collect this is just one of the weeds that is in my backyard. These are all from my backyard. Now, if there's probably 2 or 3 more things I could have gotten, but this was a quick. Now, if you don't have a yard, you could probably go to the park. You can pick up rocks, you can pick up all kinds of things. So there's a lot of things that you could do, and I want to also encourage you, maybe I keep mentioning this emergency flyer because these are things that maybe your child could help you gather together. You can talk about a plan, because when people have a plan, and the Boy Scouts talk about being prepared, when you have a plan and if there's an emergency, then you don't panic, you just adapt. You think about what else you need to do, and so these are just some things that might help you. I do collect a lot of stickers, and one of the things that I like to do is take a piece of paper like this and perhaps, fold it in half. I might say Happy Mother's Day, or it might be Happy Birthday, and just arrange things in an attractive manner. There's just all kinds of stickers that your children could, I get these at Dollar Tree, and they could make some kind of fun cards for others, or maybe something for themselves. This one is one that would be fun for summer. Some of these, this one has life is beautiful, wonderful, and so forth. So these are just some quick and easy ideas that you can do while you're home with your kids or your grandkids. So anyway, I just want to say thank you and have a blessed weekend, and remember, thank a vet.